The detention bay of the steadfast horizon was cold and sterile, filled with the quiet hum of containment fields. 12 transparent cells lined the walls, each one holding a Kharvian soldier who stood at rigid attention. These weren't ordinary prisoners. They were elite warriors from the Kharvian Dominion, captured after raiding a neutral mining colony without authorization. Commander Vex'nar stood in the center cell, his massive frame making the space look smaller than it was. He was over 8 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms and natural armor plating that covered his torso like a second skin. His eyes were dark and calculating as they fixed on the lone human officer standing outside. Lieutenant Caroline Webb looked almost fragile in comparison. She was average height for a human, wearing the standard gray uniform of Earth's Diplomatic Security Corps. On her left wrist was a sleek silver device, no bigger than a watch. She stood quietly, her hands relaxed at her sides, reviewing something on a data pad. Vex'nar's mandibles clicked together, a sound that his species made when they were amused or contemptuous. "Tell me, human," he said, his voice deep and booming, "do you truly believe these barriers can hold us?" Caroline looked up from her data pad. Her face showed no emotion. "The containment system is designed for species with your physical capabilities, Commander. Yes, it will hold you." The Kharvian warrior laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bay. "Designed by humans. Built by humans. Operated by humans." He gestured at his fellow soldiers with one of his arms. "We are Kharvian warriors. We have conquered 12 systems. We have defeated enemies you cannot imagine. And you think your little technology can stop us?" 2 human diplomatic aides stood near the entrance, shifting nervously. The younger one, Trevor, whispered to Caroline. "Lieutenant, perhaps we should call for backup? Standard protocol suggests." "Standard protocol is fine, Trevor," Caroline said calmly. "We don't need additional personnel." Vex'nar heard this exchange and his mandibles spread wide in what looked like a predatory smile. "Yes, listen to her. No need to bring more of your soft friends here. 1 weak human is the same as 10 weak humans." He began pacing inside his cell, his movements deliberate and powerful. Each step was heavy, purposeful. On Kharvia, children are tested from the moment they can walk. Combat training. Survival skills. Strategic thinking. Only the strong survive to become warriors. Only the strongest led units like mine. Caroline continued checking her data pad, seemingly unbothered by his speech. This apparent indifference made Vex'nar angrier. "But Earth," he continued, his voice rising, "Earth produces bureaucrats. Paper pushers. Diplomats who talk and negotiate because they cannot fight. You hide behind your rules and your technology because your bodies are pathetic. Your species is soft." The other aide, Patricia, moved her hand toward the emergency communication panel on the wall. Caroline noticed and shook her head slightly. Patricia's hand stopped, though her face showed clear concern. In his cell, Vex'nar was still talking. "I have personally led 43 military operations. My unit has never failed a mission. Never surrendered. Never been truly captured." He paused meaningfully. "Until your council tricks us with false treaty negotiations. But that ends today." Caroline finally looked directly at him. "Commander, you and your soldiers will be transferred to Galactic Council custody in 6 hours. I suggest you rest and prepare your defense statements for the tribunal." "Defense statements?" Vex'nar slammed one of his massive fists against the transparent barrier. The field rippled like water but held firm. "I need no defense. The Kharvian Dominion answers to no council. And certainly not to humans pretending to be soldiers." "I'm not a soldier," Caroline said quietly. "I'm a security officer. There's a difference." "Yes," Vex'nar agreed mockingly. "Soldiers fight. Security officers watch and press buttons on their little devices." He tapped the barrier with one claw. "Tell me, human, what does that toy on your wrist actually do? Call for help? Record our conversation? Take notes?" Caroline glanced at her wrist device. "It serves multiple functions." "Multiple functions," Vex'nar repeated, then turned to address his soldiers in the other cells. He spoke in rapid Kharvian, a language of clicks and low rumbles that the human translation devices struggled to interpret fully. The other warriors responded with subtle movements, small shifts in their stances. Trevor leaned toward Caroline. "Lieutenant, I'm reading increased heart rates in multiple cells. Muscle tension is elevated. I think they're—" "I see it," Caroline said. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. She made a small note on her data pad. Vex'nar watched this exchange with satisfaction. He switched back to Common Galactic, the language used for interspecies communication. Your little medical scanners tell you we're preparing something. How intelligent. How observant. He spread all 4 arms wide. But what will you do about it? Call more humans? Strengthen the barriers? Ask us politely to behave? None of those things are necessary, Caroline replied. The Kharvian commander's eyes narrowed. You have remarkable confidence for someone so weak. I could break you with one hand. Any of my soldiers could. We have natural armor. Enhanced strength. Combat training from childhood. What do humans have? Preparation, Caroline said simply. Vex'nar laughed again. Preparation. Yes, I'm sure you prepared very carefully for this moment. You read files about Kharvian physiology. You studied our culture. You think understanding makes you safe. He leaned close to the barrier, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. But knowledge without power is useless. You cannot control me, human. You cannot control any of us. The air in the detention bay seemed to grow heavier. Caroline noticed the other soldiers making more subtle adjustments. They were communicating through body language and sounds pitched too low for human ears to detect clearly. At least that's what they thought. Patricia moved closer to Caroline. Lieutenant Webb, standard security protocols state that when prisoners show coordinated behavior patterns indicating escape planning, we should. I'm aware of the protocols, Caroline interrupted gently, and I'm choosing to deviate from them. Deviate? Vex'nar overheard this and seemed delighted. Yes, deviate from your rules. Show us the chaos beneath your organized surface. Show us that humans are just as desperate and confused as any other weak species when faced with real warriors. Caroline returned her attention to her data pad, checking biometric readings from all 12 cells. Heart rates climbing. Respiratory rates increasing. Adrenaline levels rising. They were definitely planning something, and soon. Commander, she said looking up at him, before this situation escalates, I want you to understand something. Everything happening right now is being recorded. Everything you say and do will be presented at your tribunal. Vex'nar's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Kharvian equivalent of mocking laughter. Recorded. Presented. More human words. More human paperwork. You think I fear your recordings? I think you should, Caroline said quietly. Why? Vex'nar challenged. So the council can see me mock a frightened human? So they can watch me prove that your species has no business playing at security work. He gestured at Caroline's wrist device dismissively. That little toy on your arm is the perfect symbol of humanity. Small. Weak. Dependent on technology you barely understand. You cannot control me, Lieutenant Caroline Webb. You cannot control any true warrior. And very soon I will prove it. The moment came suddenly, though Caroline had been expecting it. Lieutenant Kharvian, Vex'nar's second in command, stood perfectly still in his cell for exactly 3 seconds. Then his right arm moved in a strange twisting motion. Something bright and blue emerged from beneath the armored plating near his wrist, a small device no bigger than a human thumb. Trevor saw it first. Lieutenant, he has something. The device activated with a high-pitched whine. A thin beam of superheated plasma shot out, striking the containment barrier at its base. The transparent field flickered and sparked where the beam touched it. That's impossible, Patricia gasped. The security scanners checked them 3 times. How did they hide? Biological integration, Caroline said, her voice still calm. The device is partially organic. It registered as part of his body during the scans. The plasma torch burned through the barrier's lower edge in seconds. Kharvian didn't waste time. He shoved his massive shoulder against the weakened section and the entire barrier collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Immediately, Kharvian moved to the cell next to his. He applied the plasma torch to that barrier while 2 more soldiers worked on their own cells from the inside, using pure strength to exploit the weaknesses he created. Within 30 seconds, 6 cells were open. All units, this is Lieutenant Webb, Trevor spoke urgently into his communicator. We have a containment breach in Detention Bay 7. Multiple prisoners escaping. Request immediate. End that transmission, Caroline said quietly. Trevor stared at her. But Lieutenant, protocol requires. End it. Trevor's finger hovered over the communicator, confused, but he obeyed. The line went silent. By now, all 12 Kharvian warriors were free. They moved with the precision of a military unit that had trained together for years. No chaos, no rushing. Each soldier took a designated position, forming a tactical wedge formation with Vex'nar at the point. The commander stepped forward, all 4 arms flexed and ready. His armor plating seemed even more imposing now that he was free of the cell. I told you, human. Your technology cannot hold us. Your confidence was foolish. Caroline stood exactly where she had been standing before. She hadn't moved toward the exit. Hadn't called for backup. Hadn't even raised her voice. Her hand remained near her wrist device, but she made no move to use it. "Lieutenant, we need to evacuate," Patricia said urgently, already backing toward the door. "They're between us and the emergency exit. If we go now through the secondary corridor." "Stay where you are, Patricia," Caroline said. Vex'nar laughed, that same harsh sound that echoed through the bay. "Yes, stay. Watch what happens when humans try to control warriors." He addressed his soldiers in Kharvian, sharp clicking commands that sent them moving forward in perfect synchronization. The formation advanced slowly, deliberately. Each warrior knew their role. The larger soldiers formed the outer edge, their natural armor providing protection. The faster ones stayed in the middle, ready to sprint ahead when needed. Krevtar positioned himself at Vex'nar's right, the plasma torch still glowing in his hand. Trevor's face had gone pale. "Lieutenant Webb, they're advancing. We have maybe 20 seconds before they reach us. Please, we need to." "Trevor, how many times have you seen me handle a security situation?" Caroline asked, her tone conversational. What? "Lieutenant, this isn't the time for—" "How many times?" 17, Trevor said quickly. 17 incidents in the 8 months I've worked with you. "And how many times have I requested backup?" Trevor blinked. "None. You've never? You always handle it yourself." "Then trust that I'm handling this one too." Vex'nar heard this exchange and his mandibles spread in that predatory grin. "Handle this? Human, you are watching 12 elite Kharvian warriors advance on your position. We are stronger, faster, better trained than you could imagine. In 10 steps we will be close enough to grab you. In 15 steps, we will have control of this ship." The formation moved forward. 10 feet away now. Caroline could see every detail of their armor, smell the metallic scent that Kharvian biology produced when they were preparing for combat. "You had your chance to run," Vex'nar continued. "You had your chance to call your backup. But your human pride kept you standing there like a statue. 8 feet away. You wanted to prove you were strong enough. Brave enough. But bravery without power is just stupidity." 6 feet away now. The Kharvian soldiers loomed over the 3 humans, casting long shadows in the bay's lighting. Patricia was shaking. Trevor had his hand on the emergency panel but waited for Caroline's order. Caroline remained perfectly still. Her breathing was steady. Her expression showed neither fear nor concern. She looked like someone waiting for a scheduled transport, mildly patient but not particularly worried. "Last chance, Lieutenant Webb," Vex'nar said, stopping just 4 feet away. His soldiers halted with him, maintaining their formation. "Step aside. Let us pass. You cannot stop us, and I would prefer not to harm you. You are weak, but you showed us respect during our detention. Step aside and you live." "I can't do that, Commander," Caroline said. "Then you will be moved." Vex'nar gestured to 2 of his soldiers. "Restrain her. Gently if possible, but restrain her." The 2 warriors stepped forward, reaching toward Caroline with their massive hands. They moved carefully, almost courteously, intending to simply grab her arms and move her aside. Caroline's hand moved to her wrist device. One finger touched a small icon on its surface. "What are you doing?" Vex'nar demanded. "Calling for help now? Too late, human. My soldiers will have you before." A sound filled the detention bay. It was barely audible, a low hum that lasted less than half a second. So quiet that if someone had been talking, they might have missed it entirely. Then nothing. Vex'nar frowned. "What was that supposed to be? Your weapon? Your defense?" He laughed. "It didn't even." He never finished the sentence. Something invisible expanded from the ceiling, moving faster than the eye could follow. It looked like air shimmering in heat, a barely visible distortion that spread across the entire bay in a perfect geometric pattern. The distortion touched the first Kharvian soldier. Then the second. Then all 12 simultaneously. Every warrior froze mid-motion. The 2 soldiers reaching for Caroline stopped with their hands extended, fingers spread, completely motionless. Kharvian stood with the plasma torch still active in his hand, but his arm wouldn't move to direct it. Vex'nar himself was locked in place, his mandibles open mid-laugh, his eyes wide with shock. None of them could move. Not their arms, not their legs, not even their heads. Only their eyes could shift, darting frantically as they tried to understand what had happened. The entire takedown had taken less than 3 seconds. Caroline walked calmly forward, stepping between the frozen warriors. She reached up and carefully removed the plasma torch from Krevtar's immobilized hand, deactivating it with a simple switch. Energy adaptive restraint field, she said quietly, speaking to Vex'nar even though he couldn't turn his head to face her. The more you struggle, the more precisely it adjusts to hold you. The silence in the detention bay was absolute. 12 massive Kharvian warriors stood frozen like statues, their bodies locked in whatever position they'd been in when the field activated. Some had arms extended, reaching for Caroline. Others were mid-step, one foot raised off the ground, held impossibly in place. Vex'nar stood at the front, his mouth still open, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of command that would never complete. Caroline walked slowly between them, her footsteps the only sound in the bay. She checked her wrist device, studying the readings that scrolled across its small screen. Trevor and Patricia remained by the wall, both staring in disbelief at what had just happened. "Lieutenant," Trevor finally managed to say, his voice shaking slightly. What is that?" "Standard issue diplomatic security restraint system," Caroline replied, stopping in front of Vex'nar. She looked up at his frozen face, meeting his eyes. They were the only part of him that could still move, and they blazed with fury and confusion. "The field responds to biological signatures. It reads muscle tension, nerve impulses and movement intention. Then it counters them." She gestured around the bay with one hand. "The emitters are built into the ceiling panels. You can't see them because they're integrated into the lighting system. Most species never notice them." Patricia approached cautiously, walking around one of the frozen soldiers. She waved her hand in front of his face. He didn't blink, didn't react. "How long will they stay like this?" "As long as necessary," Caroline said. She touched another control on her wrist device, and a holographic display appeared in the air, showing vital signs for all 12 warriors. "The field maintains their life support. Breathing, blood circulation, all autonomic functions continue normally. They just can't move voluntarily." Trevor moved closer to examine Krevtar, the lieutenant who had used the plasma torch. "This is incredible. I've been working security for 3 years and I've never seen this system activated. Most officers never need to use it," Caroline explained. She walked to the center of the bay, where she could see all 12 prisoners at once. "The entire point of diplomatic security is de-escalation. If we do our job correctly, situations never reach the point where restraint becomes necessary." She paused, then added quietly, "But when they do reach that point, we need to be able to respond instantly and completely." Vex'nar's eyes followed her as she moved. She could see the rage in them but also something else. He had been absolutely certain that his superior strength and combat training made him unstoppable. The invisible field had proven him wrong in less time than it took to draw a breath. Caroline stopped directly in front of him again. "I know you can hear me, Commander. The field doesn't affect your hearing or cognitive function. So I want you to understand something." She spoke clearly, making sure he caught every word. "This wasn't luck. This wasn't a surprise weapon. This detention bay was designed specifically for beings like you." She gestured to the cells behind them. "Those barriers you broke through? They were intentionally made weak enough for you to escape. The security scanners that missed your plasma torch? They detected it perfectly. We knew about it from the moment you came aboard." Trevor's eyes widened. "We knew? But Lieutenant, why didn't you confiscate it?" Caroline turned to face her aide. "Because confiscating it would have told them we knew about it. They would have assumed we found all their hidden tools and changed their plans. But by leaving it alone, they thought they had an advantage. They thought they were clever." She looked back at Vex'nar. "You coordinated your escape using body language and low-frequency sounds. You thought humans couldn't detect frequencies below our normal hearing range." She tapped her wrist device. "This records and analyzes all frequencies, Commander. I knew you were planning something from the moment you started signaling your soldiers." Patricia was beginning to understand. "So you let them escape? On purpose?" "I let them attempt to escape," Caroline corrected. "There's a difference. If I had deployed the restraint field while they were still in their cells, they would have claimed they were doing nothing wrong. That their movements were innocent. That we imprisoned them without cause." She gestured to the frozen warriors. "But now, they destroyed containment equipment. They advanced in military formation. They threatened security personnel. Everything is recorded. Everything is documented for their tribunal." Trevor shook his head in amazement. "But what if something had gone wrong? What if the field had failed?" "It wouldn't fail," Caroline said with quiet confidence. "This system has been tested on over 200 different species. It's been refined and improved for 15 years. And more importantly, it was designed by humans who understand one fundamental truth. She walked to the control panel on the wall and brought up a schematic of the restraint system. Lines of energy crisscrossed the entire bay, creating a three-dimensional web that covered every possible position. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the fastest. We don't have natural armor or enhanced senses. So we compensate. Patricia studied the schematic. This is incredibly sophisticated. The energy calculations alone must be complex, Caroline agreed. The system monitors each subject individually, adjusting the field strength and pattern thousands of times per second. It has to be strong enough to restrain them but not so strong that it damages tissue or interrupts vital functions. The field adapts to their biology in real time. She turned back to Vex'nar, whose eyes were still locked on her with intense focus. You called us weak, Commander. You said we hide behind technology because our bodies are pathetic. And you're partially right. We do rely on technology. But not because we're weak. Caroline's voice remained calm, almost gentle, but her words carried weight. We rely on technology because we learned something that your warrior culture hasn't learned yet. Strength alone isn't enough. Power without control is just destruction. And destruction is easy. She touched her wrist device again, bringing up a different display. It showed the exact moment each warrior had been frozen, with precise measurements of the forces involved. Look at these numbers, Commander. Your muscles were exerting approximately 800 pounds of force when the field activated. Your second soldier was moving at 15 feet per second. Your lieutenant had a plasma torch generating temperatures over 2,000 degrees. The display shifted, showing how the field had countered each force individually. The restraint system analyzed all of that in 0.03 seconds. It calculated the exact amount of counterforce needed for each soldier. It deployed in a pattern that covered all 12 of you simultaneously. And it did all of this without harming any of you. Trevor was reading the data over her shoulder. The precision is remarkable. Each soldier has a slightly different field strength based on their individual biology. Exactly, Caroline said. Because the goal isn't just to stop them. It's to stop them safely. That requires more sophistication than any weapon. More planning than any combat strategy. She deactivated the display and looked at Vex'nar again. His eyes had changed. The rage was still there, but the shock had deepened into something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or at least the beginning of it. You told me I couldn't control you, Caroline said softly. You were wrong, Commander. I controlled this entire situation from the moment you arrived. The only choice you had was whether to make this easy or hard. You chose hard. But the outcome was never in doubt. Caroline touched another control on her wrist device. The restraint field around Vex'nar alone flickered and released. He stumbled slightly, his muscles suddenly free after being locked in place. His forearms moved instinctively to fighting positions, but he stopped himself when he realized his soldiers remained frozen behind him. Why? He demanded, his voice rough. Why release me and not them? Because I want to talk to you, Caroline said simply. And because you're intelligent enough to know that attacking me right now would be pointless. She gestured to a small table and 2 chairs that had been set up in the corner of the detention bay. Please sit. Vex'nar looked at the chairs, then back at his immobilized soldiers, then at Caroline. His mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of confusion in Kharvian body language. You defeated us completely. You proved your technology works. What more is there to discuss? Understanding, Caroline said. She walked to the table and sat down, completely relaxed, as if she wasn't alone with a warrior who could tear her apart with his bare hands. You called humans weak. I want you to understand why you're wrong. The Kharvian commander hesitated. Every instinct told him to refuse, to maintain his pride, to show defiance. But curiosity won. He moved to the table and carefully lowered himself into the chair across from her. It creaked under his weight but held. Caroline placed a small data pad on the table between them. Tell me, Commander, what do you know about Earth's history? Very little, Vex'nar admitted. Your species is relatively new to the Galactic Council. You've been spacefaring for less than 200 years. Before that. He shrugged with 2 of his arms. You were isolated on your single planet. Irrelevant. Not irrelevant, Caroline said quietly. She activated the data pad and a holographic image appeared above it. It showed Earth, blue and green and beautiful, floating in the darkness of space. Isolated, yes. But not peaceful. The image changed. Now it showed a battlefield, ancient humans in metal armor fighting with swords and spears. Humans have been fighting each other for our entire recorded history. We've had thousands of wars. Tens of thousands of battles. We got very, very good at killing each other. Vex'nar leaned forward slightly, interested despite himself. All species have war. Kharvia had its tribal conflicts before we united. Yes, Caroline agreed. But most species had relatively simple conflicts until they reached space. Territory disputes. Resource competition. Simple weapons. The holographic image changed again, showing more advanced warfare. Cannons, guns, explosives. Humans developed increasingly sophisticated ways to kill. We turned it into a science. The images continued to shift, each one showing more destructive technology. Tanks, aircraft, missiles. Vex'nar watched in silence, his expression unreadable. We developed chemical weapons that could kill thousands in minutes, Caroline continued, her voice steady but somehow sad. Biological weapons that could spread disease across entire regions. And then, about 300 years ago, we developed this. The holographic image showed a massive explosion, a mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Vex'nar had seen similar weapons in his own species' history, but something about the scale of this one made him uncomfortable. Nuclear weapons, Caroline said. Atomic bombs powered by splitting atoms. A single bomb could destroy an entire city. Kill hundreds of thousands of people in seconds. We built thousands of them. Why? Vex'nar asked, genuinely confused. If one bomb could destroy a city, why build thousands? Fear, Caroline said simply. Different nations on Earth built them because they were afraid other nations would use them first. So everyone built more and more, trying to make sure they had enough to destroy their enemies completely. She paused. We called it mutually assured destruction. If anyone used their weapons, everyone would die. The holographic image changed again. This time it showed a map of Earth with hundreds of red dots scattered across it, representing nuclear arsenals. At the peak of this period, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy every major city on Earth several times over. Enough to make our entire planet uninhabitable. Vex'nar stared at the image. But you're still here. You didn't destroy yourselves. Almost, Caroline said quietly. We came very close. Several times, accidents or misunderstandings nearly triggered full-scale nuclear war. We survived mostly by luck. She deactivated the hologram. And then we realized something important. We had become too good at warfare. We had perfected destruction to the point where using our weapons meant everyone would lose. She met his eyes directly. So we made a choice. We could either continue on that path and eventually destroy ourselves, or we could deliberately step back. Choose restraint over destruction. Choose control over chaos. You chose to become weak, Vex'nar said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. No, Caroline corrected firmly. We chose to become disciplined. There's a difference, Commander. A warrior who knows how to kill but chooses not to is not weak. They're controlled. She gestured around the detention bay. Every system on this ship, every piece of technology in Earth's diplomatic security core, is designed with that philosophy. We don't build weapons to destroy our enemies. We build systems to control situations without causing harm. Why? Vex'nar demanded. Why limit yourself? If you have the knowledge to build devastating weapons, why choose restraint? Caroline was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain. Let me ask you something, Commander. In Kharvian culture, what happens to a warrior who loses control in battle? Who kills without discipline, destroys without strategy? Vex'nar's mandibles clicked. They are considered dangerous. Unreliable. No commander wants a soldier who cannot control their own actions. Exactly, Caroline said. Now apply that same logic to an entire species. Humans learned that having the power to destroy is meaningless if you don't have the discipline to control that power. So we trained ourselves. We built institutions dedicated to restraint. We created rules and protocols and technologies specifically designed to stop violence rather than cause it. She pulled up another display on the data pad, showing specifications for the restraint field system. This device on my wrist has 47 different non-lethal response options. It's calibrated for over 200 different species. It can deploy nets, fields, sonic disruptors, sedative gases, electromagnetic pulses, and more. Each option is designed to stop threats without causing permanent harm. 47 options, Vex'nar repeated slowly. You trained to use all of them? Every officer in diplomatic security trains for 6 years, Caroline said. We study alien biology, psychology, combat tactics, negotiation, and de-escalation techniques. We learned 47 different ways to stop violence because our philosophy is simple. Any species can destroy. It takes real strength to protect. Vex'nar was silent, processing this. His worldview was shifting uncomfortably. But what if your restraint fails? What if someone cannot be stopped peacefully? Caroline's expression became serious. Then we respond proportionally. The key word is proportionally. We use the minimum force necessary to end the threat. Nothing more. She leaned forward slightly. Commander, we didn't forget how to be warriors. We chose to be something more difficult. We chose to be guardians. 4 hours later, the detention bay looked completely different. The restraint field had been deactivated, and all 12 Kharvian soldiers now sat in properly functioning containment cells. Medical personnel had examined each one, treating the minor bruises and strains they'd sustained during their escape attempt. None had serious injuries. Vex'nar sat in his cell, watching through the transparent barrier as Caroline coordinated the transfer preparations. She moved efficiently between data terminals, checking documentation and verifying protocols. Her 2 aides, Trevor and Patricia, worked alongside her, preparing files for the Galactic Council Tribunal. A soft chime announced the arrival of the Kharvian diplomatic vessel. Through the bay's viewing port, Vex'nar could see the sleek warship docking with the steadfast horizon. His mandibles clicked softly. That ship represented his people, his culture, his entire way of understanding the universe. But something had changed in the hours since his failed escape. The bay doors opened and 3 Kharvian diplomats entered. They wore formal robes instead of armor, marking them as political rather than military caste. The lead diplomat, Ambassador Thelmark, approached Caroline with a respectful nod. Lieutenant Webb, Thelmark said, his voice cultured and calm. I apologize for the behavior of Commander Vex'nar and his unit. Their actions do not represent the Kharvian Dominion's official position. I understand, Ambassador, Caroline replied professionally. The commander and his soldiers are unharmed and ready for transfer to your custody. All documentation has been prepared for the tribunal. Thelmark glanced at the containment cells, then back at Caroline. I've read the incident report. Quite impressive. The commander is known for his aggression. Few security forces can contain him once he's committed to action. The systems worked as designed, Caroline said simply. The ambassador's eyes moved to Caroline's wrist device. Yes. I've heard stories about Earth's restraint technology, but I've never seen it deployed. The reports don't do it justice. He paused, then added more quietly, I'm grateful you chose restraint over more permanent solutions. Some species would have responded to an escape attempt with lethal force. That's not how we operate, Caroline said. The transfer process began. One by one, the Kharvian soldiers were released from their cells and escorted by the diplomatic guard to the docked vessel. Each warrior left quietly, subdued. The confidence and arrogance they displayed hours earlier had vanished, replaced by something like cautious respect. Finally, only Vex'nar remained. Caroline walked to his cell as the barrier deactivated. He stood slowly, his 4 arms hanging loosely at his sides. No aggressive posture. No threatening gestures. Commander, Caroline said, you're being transferred to Kharvian diplomatic custody. From there, you'll be transported to the Galactic Council for your tribunal. Do you understand? I understand, Vex'nar said. His voice was different now, lacking the mocking tone it had carried before. 2 diplomatic guards moved forward to escort him, but Vex'nar raised one hand, asking for a moment. The guards looked to Ambassador Thelmark, who nodded permission. Vex'nar looked down at Caroline. Even with her standing and him seated, he was taller. But somehow the height difference felt less significant than it had before. Lieutenant Webb, I need to say something before I leave. Go ahead, Caroline said. The Kharvian commander was quiet for several seconds, choosing his words carefully. I spent my entire life believing that strength came from physical power. From armor and muscle and combat training. I believed that species who relied on technology instead of natural ability were weak. Cowardly. He paused. I was wrong. Caroline didn't respond, simply waiting for him to continue. You let me escape, Vex'nar said. You knew about the plasma torch. You knew we were planning something. You could have stopped us immediately, but you didn't. You gave us enough freedom to act, to commit to our plan, to believe we had a chance. His mandibles clicked slowly. That required more confidence than I've ever seen from any warrior. It required preparation, Caroline corrected gently. And trust in our systems. No, Vex'nar shook his head. It required something deeper. You stood there, alone with 2 frightened aides, while 12 elite warriors advanced on your position. You didn't flinch. Didn't call for help. Didn't show fear. He met her eyes. That wasn't just preparation, Lieutenant. That was absolute certainty. You knew you could stop us so completely and so quickly that you weren't even worried. Ambassador Thelmark was listening to this exchange with great interest. Trevor and Patricia had stopped their work to hear as well. I've been thinking about what you told me, Vex'nar continued. About humans nearly destroying themselves. About choosing restraint over destruction. I didn't understand it at first. It seemed like weakness. He gestured around the detention bay with one arm. But this is not weakness. This is control. Perfect control. Caroline remained silent, but her expression had softened slightly. A species that can build weapons capable of destroying their own planet, but chooses not to use them, Vex'nar said slowly, working through the logic. A species that can stop 12 warriors in 3 seconds without harming them. A species that can defend themselves perfectly but still offers medical care to those who attack them. He was quiet for a moment. That's not weak, Lieutenant. That's terrifying. The word hung in the air. Ambassador Thelmark's expression showed he understood what Vex'nar meant. I misjudged your species, Vex'nar said. I thought humans were soft because you negotiate instead of fight. I thought you were weak because you choose peace over war. But now I understand. You negotiate because you're disciplined enough to control yourselves. You choose peace because you're strong enough to make that choice. He paused, then added more quietly, a warrior who knows only combat is simple, predictable. But a warrior who can fight and chooses not to? That warrior is dangerous in ways I never considered. Caroline nodded slowly. Understanding that is the first step toward wisdom, Commander. Perhaps, Vex'nar agreed. He stood fully now, ready to be escorted out. I will face my tribunal. I will accept the consequences of my actions. But I will also carry this lesson with me. He looked directly at Caroline one last time. You defeated me without drawing a weapon. Without raising your voice. Without even seeming concerned. That display of controlled power is something I will never forget. The diplomatic guards moved forward, gently guiding Vex'nar toward the exit. He walked with them willingly, no resistance. As they reached the doorway, he stopped and turned back. Lieutenant Webb, he called out. Caroline looked up from her data terminal. Yes, Commander? If I may ask one final question, Vex'nar said. That device on your wrist. The restraint field. You said it has 47 different non-lethal options. That's correct. How many lethal options does it have? The detention bay fell completely silent. Everyone waited for Caroline's answer. She met Vex'nar's gaze steadily. 12, she said quietly. But I've never needed to use any of them. And I hope I never will. Vex'nar's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile or might have been something else entirely. 12, he repeated. Enough to handle any threat, but designed to be used as a last resort. He nodded slowly. Yes, that is the human way, isn't it? Prepared for everything, including the worst, but always hoping for better. That's exactly right, Caroline said. The Kharvian commander bowed slightly, a gesture of respect in his culture. Then perhaps my people have much to learn from yours. Thank you, Lieutenant, for the lesson. It was painful but necessary. He left with the diplomatic guards, disappearing through the doorway and down the corridor toward the docked vessel. Ambassador Thelmark lingered a moment longer. Lieutenant Webb, the ambassador said, I suspect the commander's report will be enlightening for our military leadership. They tend to view restraint as weakness, much as he did. He glanced toward where Vex'nar had departed. Perhaps this experience will help them understand why the Galactic Council values Earth's approach to security. I hope so, Ambassador, Caroline said. When everyone had left and the detention bay was finally empty, Trevor approached Caroline. Lieutenant, can I ask you something? Of course. When the commander asked about lethal options and you said 12. Trevor hesitated. That number seemed specific. Too specific to be coincidental. Caroline looked at him steadily. The system can deploy lethal force if necessary. 12 different methods, each calibrated for different threat levels and situations. But you said you've never used them, Patricia added, joining the conversation. I haven't, Caroline confirmed. In 6 years of service across 17 different security incidents, I've never needed to escalate to lethal force. That's not because I'm lucky, or because the threats weren't serious. She touched her wrist device gently. It's because preparation and discipline make lethal force unnecessary in almost every situation. Almost every situation, Trevor repeated. But not all. No, Caroline admitted. Not all. There might come a day when restraint isn't enough. When non-lethal options have all failed. When innocent lives can only be saved through lethal action. She was quiet for a moment. But that day hasn't come yet. And if I do my job well, it never will. She began shutting down the detention bay systems, preparing for the next assignment. Trevor and Patricia watched her work, both of them thinking about what they'd witnessed. About restraint and power. About discipline and strength. About the narrow line between weakness and wisdom. Lieutenant. Patricia said softly. Yes. What Commander Vex'nar said about humans being terrifying because we can control ourselves. Patricia paused. Do you think other species really see us that way? Caroline considered the question carefully. Some do. Some species respect our restraint. Others see it as a weakness to exploit. But what matters isn't how they see us. What matters is that we know who we are. She looked at both of her aides. We're a species that learned the hard way that power without control leads to destruction. We're a species that chose to be guardians instead of conquerors. That's not about what others think of us. It's about what we choose to be. She finished the shutdown sequence and headed toward the exit. Trevor and Patricia followed. As they walked through the corridors of the steadfast horizon, Caroline thought about Vex'nar's final words. About understanding and lessons and the difference between strength and violence. She hoped the commander would carry that lesson forward, would share it with his people. But even if he didn't, even if nothing changed, the work would continue. Because that was what humans did. They prepared. They trained. They built systems designed to protect rather than harm. And they hoped, always hoped, that restraint would be enough. Her wrist device chimed softly, displaying her next assignment. Another diplomatic situation. Another potential conflict. Another opportunity to prove that discipline and preparation were more powerful than any weapon. Caroline smiled slightly and adjusted her course toward the briefing room. The work continued. And she was ready.